This is Craig and Andrew, two Ranger qualified Army officers with MBAs, here to help you improve your business through leadership.
Each week, we'll deliver easy lessons from the battlefield to the boardroom on how to improve team performance. If you're a leader or want to be, this is the place for you.
Welcome to the cohort.
Disclaimer: the views in this podcast are those of the authors alone and do not represent the views of the Department of Defense or the U.S. Army.
Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Command Post Cohort.
Hey, everybody.
Today, I'm going to share some lessons learned from Ranger School.
Great times.
We had, me and Andrew actually, oddly enough, ended up crossing paths at Ranger School. Kind of, I think, a unique scenario for us to both be there at the same time. Normally, you don't know anybody else when you're there at Ranger School going through, but I'm going to share a somewhat comical story about how I fell off the side of a mountain and what type of leadership lessons we can get from falling down the mountain.
Yeah.
So to give a little bit of background to this, we're both second lieutenants. I was fresh out of infantry school, and we went to Ranger School, which is the Army's leadership school. Now, it does that by way of small unit tactics and leadership experiences through patrolling and other infantry type skills. It's approximately 62 days long. There's 3 separate phases.
It's 62 days long if you go all the way through like Craig did. Andrew was not so lucky.
There is a scenic route that you can select.
Took an extra turn in the mountains.
Yeah, if you like it so much and you want to stay there extra time, they do allow that. So it varies. Experiences may vary. And the 3 phases, the first one, you start out down at Fort Benning, which is, your first week is a lot of just assessment and test. Everything from a PT test to an obstacle course. Their favorite way of keeping you up all night is combatives. So they basically just make
combatives. That's fun. Yeah. And we went through, Craig, in January. Remember that? We started like January 5th.
I remember it was cold.
Yep, it was cold.
All the way. It was cold in Georgia. It was cold in Florida. Everywhere I went, it was cold. But it was interesting because you think, oh, well, you start in Fort Benning, Georgia. Even in January, that shouldn't be too cold. And then you go to mountain phase, which is up in the Dahlonega, Georgia area, up in the North Georgia mountains. And then after that, you finish down in Florida for swamp phase. Well, this particular story was when we were both in mountain phase.
Yeah.
And it was cold. And actually, I remember it snowing on us.
Yeah, I remember that.
Because, yeah, it actually did snow on us. There was a guy in my squad from up north. I don't remember what state, but he was like, oh, well, don't worry. At least it won't snow down here. And I was like, well, I mean, I'm from Alabama. It snows on occasion, but you're right. Maybe not. About 3 days later, I was knocking snow off my rucksack trying to get into it. And the interesting thing about Ranger School is one of the ways that they create stress to test your leadership and train you for leadership is lack of sleep and lack of food.
Yeah.
Now, they give you enough food that if you were just doing normal activities, you would probably be okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you're not doing normal activities.
Yeah.
You're staying up all night. You're carrying heavy rucksacks up and down the mountains.
Yeah.
The first week you're there in mountain phase, you're having a bunch of tests like tying knots and rappelling and climbing rocks and rope bridges and like all kinds of stuff that they're testing you on.
Yeah.
And then you move off into the actual FTX or field training exercise to do these patrols where you get graded. And you rotate through leadership positions, and then you're evaluated on either a go or no-go status.
Yep.
And it's stressful in itself because, as a young lieutenant, yeah, my biggest fear is like if I don't get a ranger tab, they may not give me a platoon when I get out of here, and they're gonna like banish me somewhere to where I just do staff work forever. And that's a big fear as a young lieutenant. And so then on top of that, I mean, I was that stressed on day one when I was well fed and rested, and then they don't let you sleep. They keep you up all night fighting each other, and then you know, you're not eating a lot, and so it's a stressful time. But the story I want to share was up in Mountain Phase, and it was a patrol in an area known as Horse Gap. And I honestly don't even know why I remember that area. I actually told that to I was afraid it was kind of a false memory until this was a couple years after this story happened. I was sharing it with someone who had been a ranger instructor, and he's like, "Oh no, that's a real place up there."
That's a real place up there.
And so this was a movement in the middle of the night. It was, I mean, I have
Always
no
is.
idea what, I know it was dark and I know it was cold. And normally when you're patrolling, the movement technique is, it's known as a wedge formation. It keeps everybody spread out, which is a very tactically sound type of thing to do. But this particular night, this location, if I remember right, in addition to being dark, I think it was actually fog or something that was hindering some abilities.
Sounds right.
But the ranger instructors had actually told us to get what they call a ranger file. So you're just single line right behind each other. Now, granted, the Army likes to say that they own the night. In Ranger School, you don't exactly own the night. You might rent it at best because I think every squad had like one pair of night vision. I think only the squad leader had them, or you would normally give them to like your point man or team leader.
Yeah, yeah.
But so at this time, at least, I don't know how it is now, but years ago, back when the dinosaurs roamed, we were walking through there, no night vision, middle of the night, and I remember they stopped us, and one of the ranger instructors was telling everybody, giving us some very specific instructions. And he said to stay to one side of this trail. The other side of the trail was an extremely steep drop off. And about 10 seconds after he had told us this, I could no longer remember which side I was supposed to stay to. And I know that sounds silly now, but given the sleep deprivation, the lack of food, the high stress environment, I had no idea what I was supposed to do, but was
And
not,
borderline delirium.
yeah, borderline delirious. It's not uncommon for people to like hallucinate during ranger school. You'll see things, you will fall asleep standing up or
Yeah,
on a knee.
yeah.
And so I was like, man, I wonder which side I'm supposed to stay on. I don't want to fall. But I remember this trail had like, I guess, a gravel or natural rock to it. And so as we were walking, it kind of each step made like a little bit of a crunch. And so I remember thinking to myself, well, it's okay, like not a big deal. As long as I stay on the crunchy path, we'll be all right. So walking along, and you're trying to look at the guy in front of you, but you can't see. I mean visibility is,
Yeah.
you know, I don't almost impossible to see the
Yeah.
person in front of you, even 3 feet away. And so walking along, and I remember my right foot hit the ground, and it was not a crunchy noise. It felt like I'd stepped in leaves. And about a half a second later, I was tumbling through the air down the side of the mountain. My plan had failed me. I thought I could correct if I got 1 or 2 feet off of this trail. I was mistaken, and I was paying for it. And so as I'm sliding down and tumbling down the side of the mountain, I kept trying to reach out and grab a hold of something to stop myself. But unfortunately, because we'd been in this cold weather environment for several weeks at this point. My hands, I had some, I guess you'd call them cold weather injuries. The tips of all of my fingers had basically split open.
Oh
And
yeah.
so grabbing anything was extremely painful. And so as I was sliding, I was yelling because I was scared and falling off a mountain. And as soon as I would reach out and like grab a limb or a small tree, then my hand would hurt really bad. And so I would yell and let go of it.
I just
And so
imagine Craig tumbling down the side of this mountain and going, ooh, ow, ooh, ow, ooh, ow.
it was like, it was just yelling and screaming. I mean, it probably didn't sound like a grown man falling off a mountain. And so eventually I like land my rucksack kind of caught on a smaller tree. And so I'm just kind of pinned there. And it kind of took me a moment to realize what had happened because everything was very fast.
Hmm.
And way up above me, way high in the sky, it felt like I see a white light turn on.
And,
And
and
it's,
so and this is a big deal. Like a white light in Ranger school is a big deal. That means something's bad
yeah,
has happened.
yeah,
Because you try to be tactical, so you use red or green in very small amounts. But no, this is a big old white light.
yeah. This was the like search and rescue light for like, we think we lost him. And so it's like sweeping the side of the mountain looking for me. And I hear the ranger instructor yell down there. And he's like, "Hey, are you alive?" And so I'm like, "Yeah," because I'm still hurting. I'm not well. I'm very unwell at the time. And so then he asked the second question: "Do you have your weapon?" And in all honesty, at that point, I didn't know if I had my weapon. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know. And so uh, at Ranger School, they make you tie everything down.
Yep.
Which when they first told us that, I was like, this is the dumbest thing ever. I don't like your standards. This one is ridiculous. So
You're walking around, look like a marionette. You just got strings all over you.
yeah. So you take 550 paracord and you tie everything to like your load bearing equipment. It's like a web gear, I guess would
Yeah,
like
like your kind of tactical vest rig
yeah, you
kind
got
of
like a
thing.
vest with like your pouches for your magazines and things on it. Well, everything gets tied to that, which you're wearing, and it can't really fall off of you. So I find the 550 cord that I know my weapon is tied to, which is tied to my vest, and I reel it in like a fishing line. And turns out my weapon's still attached to it. And I'm like, well, that's good news. And so I yell back up, yes, I have my weapon. And then he tells me, do not move. He said there's water at the bottom and it's going to get a lot worse if you fall anymore. And that was
Jesus.
terrifying to me. I was already cold and shivering at all times. The thought of being, to fall into water. So I sit there, I don't move, I listen to him. And then I notice again, way up in the sky above me, that big white light starts moving in my direction. He is climbing down the mountain to come get me. And then I noticed that they actually, and I don't remember at what point this was. At some point, they had the other ranger students turn on their white lights,
Mm.
and that was again alarming to me. I was like, "Oh, this is bad," because they never have anybody turn on lights. And I can actually now, like, I can look up in the sky, or what feels like the sky to me, and see these lights.
It's like a
And
Christmas tree laying on the ground,
yeah,
all in a row in the dark there, just with weapons.
and so he gets down to me, and he asked me like, "Are you hurt?" And in my mind, I'm like, I mean, I hurt everywhere right now, but I don't know if that's normal hurt or this is new hurt. Um, and he's like, "Can you climb?" And I was like, "I think so." And so he's like, "All right, let's go." And so he basically like holds on to the back of my rucksack because I've still got a rucksack on at this point.
Yeah.
I'm still well loaded down with all this gear, and he assisted me in climbing all the way back up to the top. And I didn't know I couldn't really sense how steep everything was. I couldn't really sense much at all. Because again, I'm probably borderline delirious
Mhm.
as it was.
Yeah.
And until we got to the very top, and there were two other students in my squad there, and he's like, "Hey, help get him up on the trail." And when they pulled me up on that trail, it was like a 90-degree angle.
Yeah.
It was like somebody drug me up on to, like, if you went up to a stage at a concert and somebody drug you up onto the stage, that's how steep that angle was. And I was like,
Yeah,
ah,
I remember like sometimes standing there on the trail, standing straight up on the trail and putting my hand out and touching the trail in front of me. Like it was steep.
yeah, it was kind of shocking. I was like, oh, well, that's why I fell off so fast and didn't have time to correct my course. It's like it was the left side I was supposed to stay to.
Now I
And
know.
now I've learned this lesson. And so they get me back up there, and I think from that point on they made us turn on, maybe we went back to red lens, but they made us turn on some lights after I had fallen.
Mhm.
And it, somewhat embarrassing for me because I'm like, oh great, now I'm the reason everybody's got their lights on. And
Thanks,
it,
Craig.
yeah, this is all my fault. Um, and so when when I think back through that, and it's kind of like, okay, well, what is, you know, how do you learn a lesson from that nearly falling off the mountain? And I think there's, kind of multiple
Yeah.
perspectives to look
Yeah.
at. But I think if we go all the way back to that ranger instructor came back there and he told us what to do. He told us how to prevent this. He said, stay to the left hand side of the trail. Whatever you do, stay to the
Mm.
left hand side. And again, 30 seconds later, I didn't know that. I couldn't remember.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so we could say maybe there's a communication breakdown here. Maybe when you're talking to delirious, malnourished people, we
Yeah.
should consider that.
You got over
Um,
communicate, right?
yeah. And how I understand it's part of the training. But so I missed on that small piece of information. It seems like it's almost negligible of knowing which side of the trail to stay to, left or right. Does it really matter? Big deal. Turns out it does matter.
It's a pretty big deal.
In fact, it does matter. Um, and then, so what were the consequences of something so small? The second and third order effects. One, I fell off the side of the mountain. Um, I really wish I had a better idea of like how far I fell because I couldn't tell you with any amount of certainty. Um, but and I was fortunate that I was one not injured seriously,
Yeah.
other than aggravating my previous hand injuries with my cold weather problems. But if I had actually made it into that water all the way at the bottom,
Mm.
that could have turned into a seriously like near catastrophic event because
Yeah.
hypothermia is a real thing. And knowing how remote a lot of those places we were, it would have been difficult to get me out of there, especially if I had, twisted or broken something while I
Yeah.
fell down there. And, but, that didn't happen. But what did happen is the entire platoon had to stop what they were doing.
Yep. Yep.
The entire operation came to a screeching halt. Now, I'm sure we weren't moving extremely fast because we were a bunch of Ranger students fumbling through the night. However, we were at least moving. And then
Yeah.
once Craig falls off the mountain, we can't do that anymore. We got to all stop and wait until somebody goes down there and drags this guy back to the top. And so when I look at what are the second and third order effects of my mistake, they're pretty impactful. It took that entire, a platoon in Ranger school is probably 40 something people plus instructors, I would guess. And that way, that entire operation had to come to a screeching halt just because I fell off, which
Yeah.
could have been prevented if I had, you could say Craig should have listened better. I'm okay with that. No hard feelings. Um, if I had listened better, if we didn't have whatever that breakdown was. And I think a lot of times in leadership roles, we forget one little misstep can cause very significant second and third order effects. Things that we think, oh, that doesn't matter. And we just kind of sweep it off, brush it under the rug. And then before you know it, your second and third order effects of that could be near catastrophic.
Yeah.
And so as leaders, I think it's important to that attention to detail, that when we're looking at things, whether it be if we're planning, just trying to communicate to our team, whatever it is that we're doing as a leader, attention to detail to make sure that we don't let one slight misstep result in a near catastrophic problem, I think is important.
Yeah. And it just supports your point. So the secret in the story is that I was actually in that platoon with Craig towards the back. And yeah, everything he says after I was just freezing cold. I had this big old heavy rucksack on, and like we're marching along, right? Like, oh, fine, we're gonna get to this, and then we had to stop. Right, everybody stops. It's like bumper cars all the way back.
Yeah.
Stop, stop, stop. Like everybody, take a knee, take a knee. So everybody get down. I'm talking to my buddies around me, like, hey, what's going on this time? And they pass back, right? Somebody fell off the mountain. It's like, oh God, what an idiot. Right? Like that's the message that got passed back to us. And we didn't know how serious it was not really told to us, right? But we just knew that we were frustrated. We all had to stop again because somebody couldn't stay to the left side of the trail.
Yeah. It is. It's funny because, at that time, we talk about with communication, perception's reality.
Yeah.
And at that moment, with the exception of me, everyone else's perception was this idiot just fell off a mountain.
This idiot just fell off.
Leave him. Like, let's keep moving. We're cold.
Yeah. And like in Craig's defense, there could have been people that also didn't listen, but were fortunate enough to learn from Craig. Right?
Yeah, quite possibly.
Like, because they were in the same state as we were, right? Sleep deprived. You're eating, if you're lucky, you're eating 2,000 calories a day, but you're burning 8,000. Yeah. So exhausted.
And to the credit of the ranger instructors, I mean, I think after that, they just had us all turn on some form of light. I don't remember if it was red or white, but I do remember after that, they were like, turn your lights on. Like, we can't have that again. And it was, so they had to mitigate, okay, well, if they're not listening, we got to do something differently. And so that shows the, adaptability of them in a leadership role to be able to still maneuver this big blob of ranger students to the next location.
Mindless ranger students.
I mean, it has to be frustrating for them. It's like, well, I told them, but I'll stay to the left. And one, 10 minutes later decides to take a hard right. So it is.
Well, that's a good story, Craig. And I mean, so even though you weren't necessarily in a leadership role right at that time, right?
Yeah.
There are still lessons to be learned there, right? We just kind of went through. And it also speaks to the impact and the abilities and the necessity of the employees or the followers, right?
Mm-hmm.
The people that aren't in leadership positions, how much of an impact you can still make.
And the reality is, retrospectively, if I was a better follower, if I was a better employee, I should have asked, hey, what side did he say? Wait, what did he say? Like, I could have answered those clarifying questions, even if it was just whoever was just standing beside me. And if he doesn't know, ask somebody else. And at the time I was thinking, you don't want to, you try, and a lot of those schools, you try not to bring attention to yourself because you're like, I don't want to earn any extra push-ups. I don't want to anything like that. So I'm just trying to stay quiet and blend in. In actuality, I should have spoke up got the clarification. So to not create second and third order effects for this entire organization because I didn't understand something.
Yeah. So it's a little funny there, a little funny, but there's some goodness in there. There's some good story. There's some good points about leadership.
Yeah. Well, and I like to think too that it shows that I feel like at least you can learn some leadership lessons from even the things like falling off the side of the mountain. It doesn't have to be a great philosophical discussion. We
Yeah.
can find some of the nuggets of information in the everyday stories because when you live through these things, you can kind of look back with a little bit of humor and say, yeah, I could have done that a little different to improve that situation.
Yeah. Well, thanks for telling us, Craig. That was a fun little adventure.
Well, I hope y'all enjoyed that. All right. Well, y'all have a good one. Appreciate y'all listening.
Thanks for listening, guys. As always, take these lessons, use them, and spread them. Everyone is welcome in the cohort.
Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe for more, and drop us a line at commandpostcohort.com to request a specific topic.
We'll see you next time on the cohort.